think, act, and prosper. You are now tuned into the Money Level Show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Money Level Show, where we think, act, and prosper. Today, we have Kai Hoffman of Soar Financially on the channel. How are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. Thanks so much for having me on, Daryl. It's a pleasure.
Yes. So thinking, acting, and prospering. How long have you been covering the natural resource and commodity sector?
Yeah, I think I started back in university, actually. I bought my first mining stock back in 2003. Doesn't mean I've been covering the space since then, but that's where I had my first run-in with mining and tungsten, actually. It was a tungsten stock back in the day. But covering the space as a YouTube channel, we only started, like so many other channels, back in March 2020. Um, we started as a live channel. We did a lot of company interviews because we wanted to look the CEO in the eye. And then we sort of gradually started adding macro interviews to the channel and noticed that they're doing quite well, that people are interested in the macro. And for me personally, it's really interesting because the macro helps me understand the micro, meaning gold, silver, but also the mining stocks. Why are they behaving the way they are? What's moving markets? Where's the interest right now? So that's sort of the origin story there to Soar Financially.
Okay, so you got your experience. You bought your first mining stock, tungsten, and that was leading into the commodities bull market of the early 2000s. Did you get more invested into more companies at that time? Like, what were you seeing? What was the sentiment like with commodities at the time?
Yeah, good question. Like we started, or I started working on mining stocks back in 2008, 2009. It was a rare earth company back in the day. Of course, it did really, really well. It was a rare earth boom. It was ridiculous. What price the stock was flying off the shelves there, and literally flying off the shelves. So the valuation was a joke, quite honestly. But investors bought the rare earth hype, and it happened until like China closed the floodgates and said no more exports, and that was the end of that story. But it was an interesting space because I got to travel. I got to meet some really, really cool people back in 2008, 2009, even into 2010. And I stuck around. Like I started Soar Financial, the company behind Soar Financially, back in 2011. And some of the people I've met at the very first conference I've ever been to as an absolute greenhorn are still some of my best friends, and we chat regularly. So I'm really proud of that. And the mining industry brings some really cool people together, as we can witness here.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of interesting because like you and I, we met at the New Orleans Investment Conference last year, and sometimes like when I'm looking at channels and their growth and everything, and the guests that they get on the channel and such, and sometimes like I can see like, okay, either this person has some prior relationships or experience in this sector, or they were or they worked at some type of firm or some type of mining company or something. Like I can kind of tell like when you see the certain guests that people are getting on channels, like, okay, they've probably been in the space for a while. So I mean, for you, covering the resource sector in 08, 09, and then starting Soar Financial in 2011 and building these relationships, I can see how a lot of that's come to fruition.
Absolutely. Like my story of how I really met Rick Rule was we both went to Mines and Money. We stayed at the hotel, and I think we had breakfast 5 or 6 days in a row next to each other without speaking a word. But by the sixth morning, of course, we said hello. We were super friendly, and it was all fine. But since then, he's been recognizing me. He's like, and since then, we've been chatting frequently at conferences and just spending time together. It's been fantastic, right? But it takes time to as you said, to nurture those relationships, and I'm quite proud of that because I've been in the resource game now for, what was it, 15 years now, over 15 years, which is an awful long time. I'm glad to see things are coming around, and same with the mining companies as well. Of course, some of the friends you've met or I've met in the past are now working at a new company, and you gradually grow in the space with them as well, and that's really cool to see. And of course, you meet really, really cool, interesting characters along the way, have them on the show, interview them. Then, of course, where we met at the New Orleans conference, you get to meet a lot of people in person, and you get to fortify or solidify those relationships. And if you've done a good interview or had a good chat with them, it's really easy to say hello, and they say hello back usually, and are usually really friendly, and they don't bite in person either. So which is kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure. So transition into commodities, what some folks are here for, right? Let's start with gold. We have gold at all-time highs measured in dollars. I have a price target on gold for about a little over 2,700. I mean, right now we're in kind of these uncharted territories, and I did put a Fibonacci retracement tool on gold, and my take is about a little over 2,700. I've been reading some of the analysts' comments on gold on some of the big news journals, and they're saying about 2,700. But you know, who knows, right? And so I just kind of want to get your outlook on the physical commodity of gold, and what's your outlook there?
Yeah, it's like it's interesting times. Like as you said, like there's nothing ever seen like that before in history. History books will be written about the time we're in right now. $2,700 sounds like a reasonable target. It almost sounds conservative. If you look at some of the other price targets out there, depending on what metrics you want to use or statistic you want to use to justify your price target, right? I've seen maybe adjusted for inflation, then we're still not even near an all-time high. We should be Gold should be at $3,800, for example. But one thing I agree with everybody is that there's momentum behind gold right now, and I think it has only started. I have no idea where it's going to go. I'm not a technical analyst, and again, since we're in unprecedented times, even technical analysts have a hard time predicting where things might go. But I've talked to Gary Wagner and a couple others, and $27, 2,700 seems the price target everybody seems to agree on for now. It also depends a bit what's the main stock market doing. If I look at the S&P 500, for example, it looks like it's topping out and at 57.10. And if that retraces and maybe there's a bit of a liquidity event, also gold will retrace and it'll take some time to come back to that level. I'm not saying it's going to crash, don't get me wrong, but I'm quite pragmatic. I should be the biggest cheerleader for gold, but I'm really happy with where we're at. I don't want to get too greedy. It's hilarious. Like 12 months ago, if you've told me that we're at 2650, I would have laughed you out of the room potentially, right? And now we're trading at that levels. Let the stocks catch up. I think it's okay to take a breather, even if we come back to 2500. I'm not sure what that looks like technically, but I would be quite happy with that because the margins for the miners are growing. People can make money. You can adjust to a new situation because it's still not mainstream news. Like you have to look hard to find an article about gold. It shows up if you go to financialtimes.com or bloomberg.com. You got to scroll down a little bit. It's not headline news, and it's one of the most important commodities in the world, and it's not being recognized as that. For some reason, it's just being left alone, and that also tells me that there's a lot more gas left in the tank if gold really wants to run. We keep getting odd articles out of Saudi Arabia buying 160 tons of gold from Switzerland, trying to be secret about it. Why are they doing that? Again, I think those are questions that need answering, and I think we'll see more of that as well. More of the countries buying gold to secure their own currency, their reserves, and there's just that much momentum behind it. So first, like maybe let me summarize my answer. I'd be happy with a short breather, but in general, I agree with Citibank's, Rob McEwen's, and others $3,000 gold price target. I think we can see that. It doesn't sound as unrealistic anymore as it might have 12 months ago.
Yeah, for sure. And my interest is if gold retraces, where does premium stay? You know, so we had. I think recently we had a price move in silver, or silver. I mean, silver premiums are usually pretty high, especially when it starts running. You know, on like American Silver Eagles and such. And so silver had went up to 31. It came back down to like 27, 28, somewhere around that range, and the premiums were still up there. And so I'm kind of wondering if people that are selling gold are still going to want a high premium if it does come down to 2,500. Because of the continuous macro tailwinds that we're experiencing with the national debt of the United States, the Fed's cutting interest rates are getting cut around the world. We have central banks buying gold and such, and so I'm kind of wondering where those premiums stay up at.
Interesting topics you touched on, right? And it depends on why people are buying gold and why are they selling it. If you already own gold, you're probably not going to sell unless you need to cover your expenses. I've spoken to a couple of bullion dealers at the New Orleans conference, for example, and they're telling me investors are selling gold and some of their holdings to cover their daily expenses, which is a bit worrisome to me personally. But then again, if you look at gold and you look at 2627 right now, it seems awfully high. If you're not really following the market and you're just happy to own some gold, maybe you've inherited it from a family member, and you look at it, it's like, oh, look at this price chart, it's straight up. So maybe I'll offload. So you don't really care about premiums at that point, especially when you're desperate and have to maybe cover some daily expenses, right? Talking about premiums for silver, I think the Trump coin came out at $100 an ounce. So if you bought that, you don't care about premiums at all.
Yeah, definitely. I need the metal content, not the artwork associated with it. So yeah, what's your view on physical metals? Are you more into physical metals for investment purposes, preserving your wealth, insurance? What's kind of your view there?
Insurance and just savings. Literally, I buy it, I put it on the side, and that's it. I don't worry about it at all. I give it to my kids one day, right? It's great. I don't think I'll have to see it as a fallback option for anything were to happen. Like, I'm not that negative. Of course, the fiat system is in trouble, but we've seen it before, and I think we'll see it again. We'll just kick the can down the road. So I'm not too worried about Armageddon, quite literally. So, but it is nice to have. Like, it's a nice value appreciating asset over time. It's outperformed even the S&P 500, depending on, of course, the time scale. There'll always be drawdowns. There will always be fallbacks, but just put it in a drawer, and that's where mine is. I'm happy with that, and I don't have to worry about it. I didn't buy it to trade because you said, coming down to premiums, you can you just lose, right? There's no point in that. It's fantastic for wealth preservation, and that's the way I keep it.
Yeah, and you're able to sleep at night, right?
Exactly.
Knowing the central bankers and central planners they may screw up at some point, right? You're able to sleep at night.
Exactly. So I got something to barter with at least.
Yes, indeed. So I want to transition to the miners, gold miners, and we've seen some performance there. They've been rising, at least from some of the companies I've looked at, like at least the ETF, the GDXJ, Newmont, some of the bigger companies, but bigger market caps. But I've been kind of wondering I wouldn't say skepticism, but my curiosity is about like confirmation of a breakout, because we've had multiple times where these companies would rise and then they come back down, and then you get the sentiment of the bears and the people that are losing hope in the miners. And so I kind of want to get your take on the miners.
People are still frustrated that they can't make any performance with the mining stocks. I tell others, like, it's early days. Like, we're in I don't know. I'm not a baseball guy. How many innings are there? 9. Maybe we're in the third inning. Maybe the first card or the first 2 cards of a train have left the station, but you don't have to worry about it. You can still catch that train, right? Looking at Newmont, you mentioned Newmont, they're up about 35%. Gold is up also 27%. So based on historic averages, you usually should outperform gold, or stocks outperform gold 3-1. What does that tell you? That tells you that you still have an opportunity to make decent money in this sector. It's still underappreciated. Some of the smart money has moved in. Some of the bigger names have positioned to place their bets in the mining. Place their bets sounds horrible, actually, because they're investing. It's not a betting game, right? They've invested because valuations are low, and you can still do that. The train, as I said, the train hasn't left the station. Gold has moved, yes, but the underlying stocks are still lagging behind. Yes, like Nico Eagle, certain stocks have had a decent run. IM Gold is up over 100%, but I don't think that's the end of it. You mentioned the GDX, about 30%, GDXJ, 31%. And if you look, I wrote down some numbers last Thursday. Silver's up 31%, but the SELJ is below that. It's only 30%. That's the Silver Junior Index, for example. So yes, the stocks have started to move, but as you said, it's confirmation that there's something happening. There's positivity. I was at a mining conference just 10 days ago, sorry, in Beaver Creek, where a lot of the junior mining stocks and exploration stocks were presenting, and not a negative word, not a single one. Maybe it just means we're in the acceptance stage of grief. I don't know about that, but it seems like we're awfully close to that, and there's quite a bit of hope sprinkled in. But some of the companies, they've raised money. They have $10 million in the bank and a 30 million market cap, for example. That's the junior end of the market, right? It's not the Newmans of the world. They have way more cash, and they're printing cash right now. That's also important. The the margins have increased. During COVID, yes, we've seen gold rally, but the prices have exploded. The input costs have exploded as well. Personnel, lumber, I don't know, is a famous one. But oil prices are down right now. They're at $70 a barrel. Personnel wage growth has slowed down. That's not impacting much. So they're printing cash. Their all-in sustaining cost of Newmont is around $1,500. That gives you about $1,100 in margin. That's the biggest I've seen it in a long, long time. They will be printing cash. Watch for those Q3 numbers to come out, and you'll be surprised. We're about, what is it now, 3 weeks, 4 weeks maybe from production numbers, or actually 2 weeks probably from first production results. So you can get an estimate of what the production looked like in third quarter, and those stocks will see generalist interest come back. I'm pretty sure of that. Money market funds or money market fund investors will have to move some assets to show returns, and the 3.75% of the 10-year won't be enough for them to satisfy the interest need, and they will reallocate some of those assets. Are they all going to go into mining? Definitely not, and I hope not, because that will literally kill the sector because it's too much money for too little of space. But it'll move stocks, and we'll see that happening, and we'll catch up to that historic 3-to-1 ratio.
Gotcha. So what is your take on the royalty streaming companies versus the miners? I've personally been playing the royalty streaming companies just because of the reduction of risk, and I know some people get Rick Rule has a saying, got a hunch, bet a bunch, and some people bet a bunch, and some of the junior miners and get burned and such. And so I've personally been playing the royalty streaming. I just want to get your perspective on that.
That's an absolute safe space to play. If gold moves, they will move, and it's the best space to be in. To be honest, if you're looking for low risk investments, they will make their margins. They have guaranteed offtake and streaming deals with the producers, and they will produce cash, like a lot of cash. The question is growth. Can they acquire more? What's the plan? But it's the safest bet in the whole stable. After the royalty companies first, major miners, mid-tier producers, junior producers, and then of course all the exploration stocks and developers. And that way, but also like the returns are different though. Like if you go to the safest bets, usually the returns are the smallest. You can still make 100%. Don't get me wrong. It's not guaranteed, but the most torque, of course, is the further down you go the food chain, and that's where you make returns, right? And I think the time is slowly coming. And you might have, we've chatted before. I'm usually not that optimistic, but after meeting so many investors and CEOs 10 days ago, and none of them said a negative word, I think time is ripe. Like we've seen the bottom in junior exploration and junior mining, and those stocks are ready. A lot of them are cashed up. There isn't a cash drought like so many people say. A lot of the right companies have money, and the stocks will move. So I'm optimistic.
It's kind of the sentiment's a lot different from last fall, I would say. So you and I, we were at the Rule Symposium this year, and I saw an increase in attendance from last year. Like there was a lot more people this year. I'm interested in seeing New Orleans Investment Conference, if there's going to be a lot more people with gold at all-time highs and such. And last year the sentiment was a lot more concerning in terms of like some folks that were anticipating recession and such, and so it seems like some of those fears have subsided amongst investors and some of the companies.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, yes and no. Yes and no. I think one thing that is really important for our sector is the Fed and what the Fed is doing. So we've seen a Fed rate cut just last week, which is really important because the junior mining and the mining game, or the mining stocks. Sorry, I keep saying games. Like I hate that. But the mining stocks stopped moving, and interest in the sector completely disappeared when the Fed started raising rates in March 2022. And you can tell like funds have disappeared, funds have been dissolved, and the overall interest completely disappeared because risk capital was too expensive. It just left the sector. It just left our space. And that's, I think, what we're seeing starting to return now. Especially if the Fed cuts even more, which we're expecting another at least 50 basis points, and that will make a difference. I don't think the recession fears have subsided. I was chatting with Lobo Tigre earlier today, and we've both recognized that in mainstream financial media, we're seeing more words like downturn, prolonged downturn, soft landing. Those words didn't exist in the mainstream media language over the last 12 months. They're slowly being fed into the headlines, I think, and preparing us for what is there to come, in my opinion. And I don't expect a massive market crash. Don't get me wrong, but the recession is finally being realized, and everything that we've been talking on this channel, and you have been on your channel as well, is starting to come to fruition. Sounds like it sounds like I'm almost making fun of mocking it, but it's going to be harsh. in my opinion. Like we're sitting at 4.2% unemployment rate, and if you look at the naked number, oh, that isn't too bad. It's almost full employment if you consider 3% full employment. But I think it's much, much worse. There's a U6 employment number that's being measured by historic standards that is way higher. That's around 7%. So you have to, the recession fears are not done yet, and I think we'll see that. Curious what the real estate market does now that the Fed has lowered interest rates again. I don't think it'll trickle down immediately, and the real estate market, based on what I'm seeing, is in a bit of trouble. Like existing home sales are down in August, which is a bit of a surprise because I figured families might move ahead of the new school year or start of a new school year, which I'd say starts usually around Labor Day in public schools in the U.S. And you move before then. You don't move in October when the kid has just started school, ideally. So that number is worrisome, and that's something I'm watching.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think, a lot of people say the Fed usually cuts rates when they see weakness in the economy and stuff, and many people were pricing in a 25 basis point cut then the Fed comes out and does a 50 basis point cut. And so, the question kind of becomes like, is the Fed, realizing some of the data that we've been analyzing and seeing, and are they seeing weakness in the economy and something's going to happen? Then it's kind of hard as well with the, Lynn Alden talks about the fiscal dominance and like having to, the government just keeps, pumping money into the system, keeps, financing these deficits and stuff. And you got these two tails of two economies and such. And so it's hard trying to make sense of like all of it, like just trying to get a solid view in terms of, okay, what's going to happen,
Absolutely. It is corrupted. And you as an outsider, you and I as outsiders, we got to go filter through the mainstream media news and got to put a picture together that fits our narrative and our understanding of how the world works, right? It's not that simple. You get so many different data points. And I think I mentioned that earlier, depending on where you stand, you'll always find a statistic that fits your narrative as well. Right. So you have to go out, you have to travel maybe and go to places and see how it is for yourself. And I think that's really, really key. So you don't get fooled and run over. You mentioned Jerome Powell, like the 50 basis cut. I think if he could, he'd go back to July and cut back in July, if he could have. Right. So following the data that came out, the unemployment report revisions of 818,000 jobs that had just disappeared. If he could have, he would have probably go back and cut 25 basis points back then just to send a bit of a message. 50 was almost too harsh, but I think the market expected it after a while. It was flip-flopping. I think the day before it was almost a 50-50 coin toss where there was 25 or 50 basis points. I'm curious how much is priced into the current price environment. It's really difficult to tell, I have to admit. If I'm looking at 2650 gold or even 5715 in the S&P, like I don't know how much geopolitical risk is also priced in there. And that's something also to keep an eye on. I hate to say, but if the lid flies off in the Middle East, gold might rally even further, and we'll see $3,000 before we know it. Not really the motivation for price I want to see from gold or the S&P for that matter, but that's something we have to watch, and that might throw all the narratives out the door.
Yeah, agreed. Because we saw that with Russia, Ukraine. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the price of gold just spiked up significantly, and I mean, I was reading some Wall Street Journal today, seeing things heating up in the Middle East and such, and so it definitely had me curious on where either what's going to happen next, and then also what's going to happen to the price of oil and the price of gold and such. So I do want to transition a little bit to uranium. So we had some huge news come out this past week about Microsoft and Constellation and the 3 Mile Island. I think it's the reactor that they said was still good to go. This is like complete 180. Like I've been keeping up with the sentiment, seeing some of the bills that have been passed around nuclear, seeing the sentiment change. And I recently read with my audience an article from Barron's on nuclear, and which was a pretty huge news outlet. And so yeah, to see this from Constellation, you had uranium stocks spiking around the place. I was looking at buying into Constellation. I didn't get in there, but they spiked up about $50 in a day, somewhere around there. And so, what's kind of your take on uranium now? It seems like these the it's a marrying of tech and and nuclear that is happening right now.
Well, I'll tell you, it's something I'd love to see in Germany as well. Sort of some pragmatism taking over and some common sense taking hold, right? I'd love to see that. We got 3 nuclear reactors. We could restart tomorrow, right? Why don't we do that? But to give you my honest answer to uranium is like, it is not my forte. Like, my problem with uranium is I don't understand where the supply comes from, and I'll be totally honest about it. You see that the Sprott ETF come in by gazillion pounds of uranium U3O8, and the price, yes, it moves. Don't get me wrong, but also a lot of nuclear power plant operators had to renew contracts and things, driving price, and we're only sitting at 79.50. So for me, like, why aren't we trading higher? Right, I'm always greedy, but also where's that price that supply coming from? And I still don't understand it. And unless somebody can fully explain it to me and show me photos of, okay, it's stored here, it's being moved over there, and this is where it's being sold, and it probably exists somewhere, but I've been trying to figure it out for 10 years. I haven't spent a lot of time on it. Don't get me wrong, because I think it should be fairly simple and easy, but it isn't. It seems like there's a secret stash of uranium somewhere that keeps popping up. And until I understand this, I'm staying away from the uranium market. I'm pro nuclear. It makes a lot of sense. And I think there's some great companies out there. If you look at the Kamiko chart of the last 5 years, it's a straight line up like this. It's unbelievable. People made a lot of money. I'm on the sidelines when I don't understand something. Like, I've never really invested in lithium because I'm of the opinion we have enough big operators that maybe a few would make sense, but I don't have the technical knowledge to understand which one will be the winner. So I stay on the sidelines. Same for uranium. I don't understand the supply side, so I'm really cautious about it and rather stay away. Gold, silver, copper, I understand a little better. So I'm totally honest here. That's out of my. It's not for me.
Yeah, I appreciate that honesty. I mean, we can be experts in everything, and for me, like my thing is like I haven't spent the time to become an expert in specific. Like probably uranium is probably the most time I've spent with a commodity, uranium and gold. But I haven't gotten like fully into like, I read some about the exploration companies of gotten into the feasibility studies and stuff, but some of that goes over my head, right? And so and I'm having to learn quite a bit, and so it's definitely, I mean, we can't be an expert in every single field.
No. No, I'm happy to take a pass on that, right? It's just although I had to laugh, I read an article about the U.S. starting to investigate uranium imports from China starting in 2022 because apparently the uranium is coming from Russia because the U.S. didn't import any uranium from China from 2020 to 2022. So I wonder what happened in 2022. It's a really interesting market. The stories around it are amazing, and especially around enriched uranium, which as far as I know, and I might be wrong, but there might be only a small refinery in the U.S., but it wouldn't be enough to refine uranium for usage in power plants right now. So really curious, like how that whole story develops, and I'm happy to follow. I find it really interesting, but it's not a market for me.
All right, so transition into silver then. So we currently have silver. I think it's last I checked, it was at over 31 an ounce. What's your take on the movement of silver? I mean, we haven't seen above $30 in a number of years, and so we're here. But I think the question maybe is, do we hold it? Do we go higher? What's kind of your projection and your take here?
We will go higher. The question is when. I think silver is lagging massively behind gold, and I'm running out of explanations why that is. And I'll probably get crucified in the comments, and I do apologize beforehand. But silver must be seen as an industrial metal by the overall investors, by the hedge funds and everybody who buys big bulk commodities. Like, it must be seen as a commodity, as a base metal in that regard, and that's the only explanation I have for the price behavior. Yes, we broke above $31, but if you look at the gold silver ratio, we're at 85, 86. So silver is lagging massively behind. It is time to close that gap, and if that happens, silver will go parabolic. It feels like we're almost at the bottom of the hockey stick right now. So the next step, the next step might be might be, as I said, parabolic, might just explode. It's ridiculous how silver is behaving. That's the only explanation I can come up with, because silver is needed and I don't have to tell you that, Daryl, but EVs in the batteries, in the solar panels, and in everything that we need and use these days, even in deodorant, right? So why isn't silver going parabolic? You can go follow the conspiracy theory that it's being held down by whoever, maybe because it's used in missiles, or that it's seen as an industrial metal and people fear a recession, so they're not buying more and they're keeping the price down that way. Maybe they're even shorting it, shorting the contracts because they're worried about US recession or global recession and keeping the price down. And it's behaving more like copper than it is like gold. And if you look at the silver and copper chart, overlay it, there's a correlation in the last 2 3 years, and that's why I'm not making this up out of thin air. So I've put my thought into this, but please don't crucify me down below. But that's my honest opinion on that. And if silver breaks out of that mode, and if that happens, it'll go parabolic. So $50 is going to be the next level, and then honestly, I don't know. It usually outperforms gold by almost 100% when that rallies. Then we should be maybe at $90, $100. You make up your price target. Like I don't even want to put a price on it because that's when it starts to sound ludicrous. But I set that about $3,000 as well for gold. So we'll see where it goes. Once the handbrake is off, silver will rally.
Yeah. So you all be nice in the comments. I know you're emotional about your silver out there, but let's try to use some emotional intelligence here, okay? So yeah, I think there was a kind of debate about how much silver was in a missile and such, and yeah. That was, and then Jeffrey Christian was brought into it, and people were just outraged. It blew their fuses, right? Let's transition to copper. So copper is a industrial metal. It's needed, very necessary for especially the electrification of grids and all of these things, right? And I saw a recent tweet from Lobo Tigre about the because he still projects recession, and obviously for base metals that's problematic. I've been looking at companies like the rare earths and stuff, and which are base metals as well, but copper, like what's your outlook on copper? Like do you think we had a big move earlier this year? It came down from that move. And it seems like a lot of people are waiting in limbo for recession or whatnot before they want to touch these things. And I guess it depends on your outlook on your long-term view. If you're investing for the long term, you may want to average in or buy in a tranche or whatnot. But yeah, just want to get your take on copper.
Yeah, following silver, I think copper is the metal with the highest upside over the next 10 years, perhaps. Not tomorrow, but the next 10 years. As you said, we'll need it for everything going forward. And the thing is, like, copper is supply driven. And depending on what analyst you want to listen to, there's going to be a supply gap. There's no doubt about it. Doesn't matter if it's 25, 26, or 30, it'll happen. The electrification of vehicles is slowing down. That's fine. It'll give us a chance to catch up. It was never realistic to go all electric by 2030. I apologize. I don't believe in that goal. It doesn't make any sense. There's just not enough copper out there. Anybody will tell you that. It doesn't make sense. There's a reason why BHP just bought into Filo Mining together with the Lundin Group for $4.5 billion. And that's a development stage asset, or not even that stage. It's still in the exploration phase. That'll take 10, 15 years to take into production. And we'll need, now I'm making up numbers, but we'll need like 20, 30 of those projects to go into production to catch up with future supply. We're not finding enough. We're not finding it fast enough. And worst of all, we're not putting it in production fast enough. That has various reasons. It's either in jurisdictions that are a bit iffy, or they're in jurisdictions that are legally challenging, where permitting just takes forever. So watch the supply side for copper. That's why I'm extremely bullish on it. Not tomorrow. Give it 12 months, and then copper will absolutely rally. Once we're past those recession fears, you can see it in the chart. Sentiment changes a little bit. Copper rallies. We've seen that just last year, as you mentioned. Copper rallied to $5, which was an all-time high. But that was on a sentiment change. You go through the news, everybody thought the recession was over. And all of a sudden, everybody piled into copper. And that's what we're going to see again. Right now, recession fears are looming. I just mentioned it earlier. We're starting to see terms like prolonged downturn and soft landing in the mainstream media headlines. That is what's keeping copper at around 430 right now, which is still a decent level. Copper miners are still making money. But once the supply side starts to go dry, that's when copper will go parabolic. Again, won't happen tomorrow. It'll be gradual because the traders are always ahead of the game. Follow the Glencores, follow the Trafigura's. Go check out their investor presentations. There's always phenomenal content in there in that regard. I've seen a Glencore presentation. I think it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but they listed every single copper mine in a pretty much in a table format, and they had the production target and then their expectation, which was really, really interesting to see because half of them wouldn't even meet the expectations, or they were in construction. There was something happening, and that is what's driving copper. It will drive copper, and I'm super bullish on it. You can probably tell, and I'm really looking forward what copper price has in store over the next years.
Yeah, for sure. And do you factor in any news from China? Some people are saying China's potentially going through a slowdown or whatnot. And I know they're like, I think, the world's largest commodity importer. Do you have any of that factored into your outlook? I mean, obviously that means like longer we may have to wait for the parabolic moves, but just wanted to see if that's anything you've considered.
Yes, absolutely. But China just put a ton of money also in stimulus packages out to the industry as well. So I think they're trying to mitigate that risk. But if the U.S. sneezes, the world catches a cold, and I think that's what we're seeing. Europe is already in slowdown. German manufacturing numbers were horrible this morning, so the world is already struggling, and the copper price is holding up. I think that is telling you something already. I wouldn't have been surprised to wake up see copper maybe at 350, but we're trading at 430, which is still a very decent level for copper. That's telling you something. And yes, there will probably be some shocking news when maybe somebody finally admits that we're officially in a recession, and copper might dip below $4 again, and maybe China hits a harder recession as well. You have to keep that in mind. But overall, I think the price of copper is still healthy, and there'll always be a black swan event. But China, as you mentioned, they're doing everything to stimulate the economy so that that doesn't happen. We'll see what the U.S. does come post November. What is it, 4th or 5th? And we'll see how that goes.
Okay. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, so thank you for sharing all of that with us. What's kind of like your general outlook coming out of? I mean, the U.S. has an election, and it's sad that there's a lot of countries around the world, and everyone, like a lot of people, are waiting to see who gets elected and what's going to happen next, right? But just wanted to get your take on just kind of what are you looking forward to the next year? I mean, obviously. I mean, different presidents have the different candidates have different policies, and who knows how that's going to affect what type of investments and such. But obviously, I mean, the math is mathing in terms of like, okay, these commodities have to go higher and over the long term, especially with these carbon net zero goals and things of that nature. But just want to get your outlook moving forward before we close out.
I'm really excited about the mining space in general, and you might have caught that earlier. Like my excitement, I think we're just seeing the start of something, and I don't say that lightly. Like if you go to my conferences, my events, like I'm really more of the pragmatic, the moderate type. Like I'm not the cheerleader, and I try to be cautious. Yes, I'm a PR guy, but keep that in mind. Like go back a couple of years, watch my interviews. I was more pessimistic than ever, and I shouldn't be as a PR guy, right? But this time it feels like there's something happening. The sentiment is slowly changing. Gold is in an all-time high. That definitely helps, but it's the underlying stocks that are starting to move. And once they really start to move, once the generalist starts to understand, okay, I can make money here. Maybe after the Q3 numbers come out, we've seen that in 2 months, or sorry, 2 quarters of solid free cash flows for the major mining companies. That shows solidify the image that this is still a very undervalued sector, and then money will flow. And I think that's where the excitement is. That's what I'm really excited about. And quite honestly, I hope everything slows down in the world a bit as well. There's too much news going on. Maybe it's because of social media that I get to see everything. I hope the world slows down a little bit and kisses and makes up. Quite honestly, it's really difficult to pinpoint where the news is even coming from. Is it Russia, Ukraine? Is it what's going on in the Middle East? Is it China and Taiwan? Is it North Korea sending trash balloons to South Korea? It is really tough, and we're trying to make sense here. And you're doing a fantastic job at it, Daryl. We're trying to make sense of the noise out there, and it is getting more difficult by the day, I feel like. And I hope that slows down just a little bit. I don't know in which way and how we can achieve that, but that is one of my hopes for the next 12 months here, Daryl.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, so where can people find more about you, more about the work you do and such? Go ahead and drop some of your links or websites where people can learn more about the work you're doing.
Yeah, youtube.com/Soar Financial, the at Soar Financial YouTube channel. I'm the junior mining guy on Twitter or X at JR Mining Guy. And please reach out. Like DMs are open. Send a message if you have any questions. Love to hear from you. Any feedback is welcome. As you might notice, miners are my strong suit here. That's my bread and butter business. So feel free to reach out anytime. And Daryl, I really appreciate being on the show here.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Look forward to hopefully having you back sometime. Love to have you come back, and I may see you in New Orleans. I'm still contemplating, but I'm hoping to get down there.
Yeah, it'd be worthwhile conference. Trust me.